So thank you again. And we're going to just talk to you guys a little bit about our research here today and how you can use story maps to disseminate your research or get out a story. And then everyone's going to get a chance to work on your own story map or make your account or just open it up if you've never even seen it before. So let's get started. If you could go to the next slide, thank you. A little bit about us. My name's Sahar Forzan. I'm a PhD student in the anthropology department, focusing on environmental health and environmental justice studies. And I'm also a graduate student researcher for the Center for Health Disparities.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. My name is Isabel Swanson, and I'm an undergraduate here at UCR. I'm a psychology and pre-med major, and I'm an intern here at the Center for Health Disparities Research.
Awesome. Thank you all for joining us today. So my name is Preeti Jaturu. I'm an undergraduate public policy and economics student here at UCR, and I'm also an intern for the center. And we're really excited to have you all be here.
So this is our workshop schedule. So first we're going to talk to you guys about what is a story map and all the prep work that goes into making a story map. And that's from getting your content, sourcing it, what kind of content you want to use, and then turning that into an outline or a storyboard. And then we'll talk about how to construct a story map and the elements that are available to you. And then we'll get a chance to actually go into the application and work with any materials you guys have. If you guys brought materials or are working on a research project that you want to work with, please feel free to do that during that last half of the workshop. If you didn't bring any materials, that's okay. We have materials that we'll provide to you that you can work with and kind of just practice making a story map using the stuff that we've done already working on our story maps for our research. And then finally at the end, we'll take any questions or ideas if you guys want to kind of Q&A and talk about what you're thinking or if you have any questions left over. So our workshop objectives. So we hope that you guys will, participants will gain a basic understanding of how to make a story map.
And our second objective is that you'll understand the significance of story maps and how they support community-engaged research initiatives.
And third, that you'll be able to learn how to organize your research into a narrative.
And then also that you'll learn how and when story maps can be used to disseminate information.
And then fifth, that you'll learn to recognize which tools and contents are necessary to build a story map. So a little bit about our work. The three of us have been working on a story map series called Exposing the Desert, which narrates environmental health and environmental justice issues in the Coachella Valley related to the Salton Sea. The Salton Sea is California's largest lake, and it's currently having a lot of environmental and public health issues. For those of you who were speaking at the childhood asthma panel at the Salton Sea or attended it, this story map kind of follows that project, as well as we are expanding it to talk to government representatives and things like that as well. So we have two story maps published. One provides background information on why the Salton Sea is an environmental and public health emergency. And then the second one follows the R01 project at HDR at UCR on childhood asthma in the Salton Sea. For that one, we've interviewed lead researchers about their projects and their challenges. And then we hope to do two more that'll come out in the spring quarter. And so later in the presentation, we'll be showing you guys these story maps and using them to kind of talk about what elements you can use and how to present and make your story into something that can be read by anyone. So introductions to story mapping. So in this part, we're just going to kind of talk to you generally about what is a story map and what you need to even begin making a story map before you even open up the application. So a story map is a web-based application. It's kind of like a website. It's based in Arcgis Online, which is a platform created by Esri, which is a company. It's a marketer of GIS technology. GIS is Geographic Information Systems. It's a mapping software. And so Story Maps is an application within the ArcGIS Online that allows you to combine multimedia content to create a story.
Yeah, and just building a little bit off of what Sahara said. So story maps are extremely adaptive platforms that actually allow you to customize your presentation to fit your needs. There are programs like Prezi, PowerPoint, Google Slides that you can showcase your work, but story maps, on the other hand, they create an interactive web page that can be used for like so many more purposes. So we'll go over some of those features a little bit more in later slides, and you can use a story map to tell your unique story.
So I guess to actually get started with creating a story map, there's a couple considerations that you should keep in mind when actually going about the process. So here we've created 4 kind of guiding questions that y'all can use to kind of think about ways in which you can approach story mapping. So the first kind of guiding question is, who is your target audience? So really, who are you trying to reach out to with your work? Are you attempting to cater your work towards academics, community members, policymakers? There's a different amount of demographics that you can really reach out to using your story maps, and it's important to make sure that your content coincides with their educational level, knowledgeability, etc., which kind of goes into our next question, which is, what is the anticipated educational level of your audience? Who are you trying to actually disseminate information to, and how are you going to do that? If you're trying to talk to lay people, if you're talking about a complex research project, you're going to want to make sure the language that you're using is in terms that are simple for everyday people to use, as opposed to a niche academic subgroup. And that kind of also goes into, potential accessibility concerns, making sure that not only is the wording and the language you use accessible, but making sure that it also takes into consideration linguistic barriers. So do you have translations for some of your content? Are you able to, for example, make sure that your content is accessible to folks who are Spanish speaking if you're doing research or community advocacy work in an area that's primarily Spanish speaking? It's also important to make sure that your videos, multimedia, and integrations are accessible to individuals with visual disabilities. So making sure you have clear graphics, and also ensuring that you're not bombarding your story map with too many moving elements, because there might be internet bandwidth concerns, which we'll touch on later in the slides. And that flows into the next guiding question, which is, what are the types of multimedia do you actually want to incorporate? So in order to convey your story, you can integrate a variety of media types, from audio, photo, video, text, to even maps. And you can use each of these elements in a way that can disseminate your information. So it's important to keep all of these questions in mind before actually getting started. And now I will be handing it off to Sahar to talk about the types of data and actual content you can add.
Thank you, Preeti. So before you can start your story map, you're going to want to think about your content. What kind of content do you need? What kind of story are you telling? And where are you going to get it from? So there's many ways to tell a single story. So it's important to keep your target audience in mind and what key points you want to hit. Like Preeti was saying, depending on what kind of niche group or community you're speaking to is going to depend on what kind of content you include. So to raise it, are you raising awareness about something that's happening in yours or another community? Is it specifically about your research and you're using it to speak to other researchers? So those will determine the type of data you use and then how you present it within the story map platform. So just briefly, I know a lot of us kind of already know what kind of data we want to use, or maybe you guys already have all of this figured out. But just briefly, there's 2 types of content to include in a story map that kind of work off of each other. And these are qualitative and quantitative data. You don't necessarily have to have both. I've seen story maps that focus on one or the other. But it's especially in a place that integrates so many different types of material, multimedia, it's nice to have both as supporting material. So qualitative data can be in the form of interviews, structured and unstructured, focus groups. If you're looking at a focus group and kind of picking out who's answering what questions, how excited were they to answer a question, those are all kind of qualitative data. observations, archival research. So if you're pulling out, you know, what hasn't been said in history, throughout history, what are the subjugated knowledges that you want to identify and focus on. It can be participatory action research or ethnography, which both of those kind of encompass all these different forms of qualitative data, depending on what you want to focus on or what your specialty is. So like for me as an archaeologist, as an anthropologist, sorry, I do ethnographies. And so that's a little bit of everything from interviews to archival research to participant observation. And so these are just your experiences and how you want to format your story map and your content. And then there's also quantitative data, which I apologize, I'm not an expert on, but I use quantitative data and we use quantitative data in our story map as supportive data, as to say, like, this is what people know about asthma in this particular area or something like that. So it's statistical, it's structured, it's numeric data. If you have a series of experiments and you have like a controlled variable and you're testing different elements, or in the case of Dr. Aronson's project, which we highlight in our story map, she's looking at different microbes and communities in the water and testing for those. And it can also be surveys. So if you're trying to answer a specific set of questions and you want to get a general sense of what people are thinking, or what are the things that people have on their mind. And then it's also GIS coordinates and that kind of data if you're mapping spatial variations and you want to see how many hospitals are in a particular area or things like that. So like I said, all of these different elements like qualitative and quantitative data are both great, and they both imply different things. So your quantitative data might be something that you need to translate a little bit more in a story map. People might not understand right away what you mean when you're talking about your experiments or things like that. And same with qualitative data. If you might need to provide some background information on how you went about your research, your methods. And so those are all things to include to help your audience kind of understand what's happening. And then finally, where are you going to get all this content? So one, your own research, either if you're a student or a faculty member, or if you're a community member, what's your project? What are your goals and your guiding questions? But then you can also turn to Google Scholar or for supporting materials on literature, finding the gaps. You can also go Google news media and things like that. What's happening in the general like main media realm? What are people saying? How do they construct a story, and how can you respond to that story or go in a different direction? And then you can also use royalty-free photos online. So if you type in stock photos and videos free online, you'll go to royalty-free websites like Pixels or Unsplash, iStockPhoto. And you can download and use these photos in your story map. Just be sure that you're looking at the citations if they require you to cite who took the photo or the video or anything like that. And then another great source is Arcgis Online itself. So this is like I said, it's a platform, and anyone with an Arcgis account can add their data to this platform. So if you are somebody like me who focuses more on ethnography and doesn't know how to make a map, Arcgis Online has that for you, where you can adapt somebody else's map that they've provided available for anyone to use, like points of like the space of the Colorado River Basin or something like that. So that's a great place to share your work with others if you want to provide other people with your research, and also you can use other people's work in your own story map.
Okay, so now getting a little bit more into the logistics of actually creating the story map. There are some types of outlines that we use that can be used for different purposes. So really, story maps are meant to be an outlet for creativity. They have unlimited potential for what they can become. With this in mind, it can be beneficial to create a framework for purposes of organization, because if you have it too abstract, it really can be hard to really make sure you're getting your point across. And so we've listed some of the methods that we use when creating the structure of our story maps. maps, and I'm going to explain why they're useful in this context. So lists, first off, are helpful to keep track of your topics of interests. You can create a list of concepts to cover, and it prevents from any tech mishaps that might occur while using a new complex program that may distract from the point that you're trying to get across, and it just really helps you like keep your information in alignment. And then storyboards off of those lists, they give your list life. So you can use a 2D diagram like a flowchart or Venn diagram to put your list into action, or you can create an interactive, tangible model of your ideas, such as like using a collection of flashcards that you can like put tape on and connect to each other to show internet connectedness of your ideas. And then if you go to the next slide, please. So this is actually an example. I use the flashcard example because I've actually done it myself. And so there's a fun little wall of some of my research ideas that I'm actually in the process of turning into a story map. And then there's a notes list type of outline that I actually began with to be able to put that into action.
Okay, and then this last part is asking yourself, what do you still need? So once you've kind of organized everything that you've done into an outline and you have your narrative and everything ready to go, because story maps is multimedia, you need to ask yourself, what supporting materials might I still need? So this is done by taking stock of your inventory, look at your outline, your key points, and kind of think about your writing. Like if you're talking about water pollution, maybe a photo of like a zoomed in photo of brown water or something would be helpful for your audience to recognize that and remember that. Or like a long shot of a source of water pollution or something like that. Or if you're following different places in across the country, maybe a map that shows all the different cities that you went to. So these are like supporting materials really brings your narrative to life. It helps your readers identify your key points and kind of helps them to forget that they're looking at a web page and that this is really an immersive story. And then you also, like I kind of mentioned, you want to vary the perspective. So you don't want like all photos like all zoomed in or something. You want a long shot and a medium shot, or a video that pans to the left or the right, changes in composition and things like that. And then you also want to ask yourself, do I have enough supporting documents or materials? So if you're making a claim about something, you need to make sure that you're supporting that with either something that you found in your research or your lived experience, or through another person's research or something like that. So all of this last part is just kind of really thinking about how can I help my reader, my audience, understand this material best and help them remember it?
Okay, so just a little bit about the story map structure. So story maps are pretty unique and interesting in that they can be a platform for lots of different types of audiences. And so if you're writing something like a typical research paper that you want to turn into a story map, that's something that you can very much follow this type of structure with, where you have section 1, which is like an intro and a beginning. It's where you introduce your topic. And then you can go to section 2, which is like the body, the main content. It's where you tell your story. It's where you get all of your main details across. Section 3, it's the conclusion and ending. It's where you synthesize everything, tie it all together. And now that's obviously very much malleable for different intents and purposes. And this is a general structure that you can follow that's helpful to make sure you include everything, but isn't set in stone by any means.
Just realized I was muted, so I apologize, but thank you so much, Izzy. And so as Izzy kind of mentioned, in order to, construct your story map, you have to have a structure. And I'm going to be talking about the elements that you can actually use to put together that structure and embed different elements into your story map to convey your story. So Basically, there's three types of broad subsections of elements within the story mapping platform. There are your more basic or traditional type of elements that you would see in really any type of multimedia platform. So adding text, links, and separating your sections. Then, of course, you have your more, immersive and interactive sections, which I'll talk about in more detail in the coming slides. And then, of course, you'll have, again, traditional media types with the exception of a couple unique ones. So you can add photo, video, audio, and I think the unique aspect of this is you can also integrate interactive maps and embed different websites and platforms into your story map. So here you can see that these are the 6 basic and immersive elements that you can integrate. Basic elements include, text, which is of course customizable, and essentially it's your written narrative aspect of your actual story map. Then you can integrate links, which you can connect to using button elements. And these are really great when you want to highlight certain hyperlinks to whether it be sources or websites external to your story map. And then, of course, you have section dividers or separators, which are helpful to actually create the different sections, as Izzy kind of mentioned earlier. And these are, of course, your more foundational elements, which really make up most, if not all, of your story map, depending on the type of story map. Then you have your immersive elements, which I would say are more advanced in nature. And these advanced level tools really help combine multimedia maps and narratives together. These are really powerful, and I think these are the most unique aspect of the story mapping platform, which is why when we show you an actual example of a story map in a coming slide, you'll see what I mean when I talk about these. But basically, there's 3 types. There are slideshows, which are similar to Google Slides in a sense, but more interactive. Essentially, you can create little presentations that incorporate photos, videos, and text together, and they're more moving part in nature, so they're a bit more eye-catchy. Then, of course, you have your sidecar feature, which is basically a scrolling immersive experience that combines a side panel with text or maps with a map and or video on the other side. I know it's kind of difficult to understand right now, but again, it'll make more sense when I actually show you all an immersive story map experience in the coming slides. And then, of course, you have a map tour, where you can actually take text elements, photos, videos, etc., and have them attached to points in a map and make an interactive map tour in which individuals can click on locations on the map and actually be redirected to text and media elements associated with said location. So it's pretty neat. It's kind of, think of it as, Google Maps, but more advanced and with actual content that you can use for understanding the material in a story map. And then lastly, you have again, your traditional multimedia with the exception of a couple more interesting elements. So you can actually integrate maps into your story map, hence the name story map, I suppose. And Esri is one of the leading creators of mapping GIS programs. So it makes sense that they have this integration, but essentially you can use another platform known as Arcgis Online, which syncs with the story mapping platform, also created by Esri, and you can create spatial visualizations and visualize spatial data into maps. And spatial relates to, mapping, locations, etc. Then, of course, you can integrate traditional media such as images and videos, which are really great to convey visual data or highlighting locations, narrative, etc. You can also integrate audio, which I think would be really great to use if you're trying to integrate, interviews, accessible media, and you can even use it as a kind of a translation platform. So ensuring that language translators can actually provide translations using an audio feature. And then you have an embed section where you can integrate iframes, code, tweets, and other websites into your story map in a way that redirects people to those sources. So you're not creating those from scratch. And then lastly, you have a swipe feature, which helps you show comparisons between two images or maps through an interactive sliding panel. And this can be really great to use if you're trying to show a change over time, a historical map or a historical image versus a current map or image, etc. So I know I kind of went through those a little bit quickly, and the reason why is just to give y'all a brief overview as to what those are, because I think, you know, you kind of have to see it to really understand what they mean. And so I will be sharing my screen and showing you all the second story map that we made together, which highlights essentially the work and research that HDR at UCR is doing to address the environmental health and condition in the Salton Sea. So let me click on the link, and please let me know if you can't see the website because, you know, technical details, you know, it happens. But something to note is that some elements, depending on how, I guess, interactive they are, can actually take a lot more bandwidth, which makes them take a while to load. So I apologize in advance if some of the elements have a delayed loading response. Either my internet is bad or my computer can't handle it, either one. And I think that's something to also keep in mind when you're creating your own story maps, is ensuring that your story map is accessible to people. And I will admit our story map, you know, I would say it's moderately accessible with the exception of a couple high-level integrations. So that's something to keep in mind depending on who you're trying to reach out to with your work. But I see that it's finally loaded, or at least I'm hoping. So let's go through it and actually show y'all how those elements really make the story map. So as you can probably see on your screen, this is kind of the introduction section, as we kind of mentioned earlier. So you've got your title, we added a subtitle, and you know, usually you'll also have the author names in the front, but we added those at the bottom because we didn't really want to highlight it in the top part. And we were able to add a little video in the background, so it looks really nice. And then let's move on to the actual integrations. So here we used the sidecar feature. And so you can see that there's an image here and there's maps that we actually integrated and text to tell our story. So here we introduce the Salton Sea, give a little bit of a historical background. And as I scroll through, you can actually see maps that we created. So this was a map that we made that essentially shows asthma rates per census tract in Imperial County, for example. And so as you can see, we're able to effectively convey a story while integrating more visual details. So here's a photo that was taken that we integrated in as well. And so as I scroll down, it actually will transition to another image or map or whatever. So here we mapped out, again, asthma rates per census tract and county in California. And we talk more about asthma rates and the incident rate of asthma symptoms in the Coachella Valley. And let's see. I'm scrolling down more to transition to the next section, because here we show the actual Salton Sea and its exposed playa, excuse me. And you can see that on the right side, we talk more about, you know, the details of that. And something to note, and this might be something that's helpful for all of you to integrate in your own work, but we actually included section summaries. So for each section in our story map, but at the end, we created a few sentences that actually summarize what we talked about. And this could be really helpful to folks because we use extremely simple and accessible language. So, you know, if any of the work that we discussed earlier was a bit more technical in nature, the section summary really helps understand what's going on. And so this is conclusion of the introduction. And then here we have our next part where it's mainly text heavy. As you can see, we also included a photo of the HDR team. We include a little bit about the center. And then here, this is the slideshow presentation aspect in action. So here's an image of the Salton Sea in 2002, specifically the northern end. And then after that, you can see in 2016, there was a receding basin here. So this was a really interesting way of showing a comparison. And another way you could have done this is to also, again, use the sliding interactive way to do that. There's different elements, of course. We chose to do it like this, but again, you can do it however you want. And so we did the same for another section of the Salton Sea. And you can see the receding sea. It's quite sad, really, but it's being effectively conveyed using these elements. And again, we added a section summary. And so now we actually go into the real meat and potatoes of our content. So here we're highlighting different researchers at HDR and their work around the Salton Sea. So here we have Dr. Emma Aronson, and we actually did an interview with her. And as you can see, we add little quotes and stuff like that. And this would be an example of qualitative research. Sahar, I was wondering if you wanted to jump in, or Isabel, to kind of talk more about the qualitative components of our map.
Yeah, thank you, Preeti. And I'd just like to note that the lead researcher for this project is here, Dr. David Lowe. So thanks so much for participating in our story map. And so for this story map, we've been working on it for a while, and it's in collaboration with HDR, the different teams in HDR between the Community Engagement Core and the research teams. And so for this, Isabel and I split up the interviews, and we did our IRB, and we went through and just asked, just wanted to get a sense of what people were thinking. And then this project changed in multiple ways, where in communicating with people from the community board, community members from North Shore, asking oh, is it going to include past research or literature review or things like that, or what kind of questions are you going to ask? So really just kind of being flexible with your work. And there was also other things that we wanted to include in here, but be it with bandwidth or with just not having the right material resources to do that. If you play around in the ArcGIS platform, you can see some companies have amazing spatial maps that are hecka crazy and just all over, but you don't need to have that really to have a good story map. So you can have something that's simple like this, and that takes your reader into a story, into a research project. You can see there with the that Preeti just scrolled past that photo, we got that from a stock photo online. So just kind of unraveling our work here, that's not something we took, but we attributed the photographer, those are royalty free. There's same with this, I think this map Preeti made, but that background map of the Salton Sea and the mountains and stuff, that's a template. So you can then use the template and then create, put in your elements and how you want to make your story map. And so it really just kind of gives you the skeleton material for you to put in your research.
Thank you, Sahar. Isabel, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, honestly, just on top of that too, something I really love about the story maps is that since it is so complex and does take a while to put together, it really becomes your baby. You have complete control over it. It is ultimately customizable. And you can see, we have drawn from so many different things to be able to make it how we want it exactly. And it really is able to showcase, I think, unique, customized ideas and beliefs and values that are contextualized to our communities and the people that we're trying to provide a platform for. And so I think it's really great for community engagement as well.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, I completely agree. And I think just some things to highlight here. We added links. We didn't use the button feature necessarily for integrating links, but when you hyperlink items, you can actually have them show up as this little gray text box, which is really nice to indicate that it's a link. As you can see, we added some images. Each section has its summary. And here's Dr. Porter's interview and section with the work that he did, and we added quotes, and we also synthesized what he talked about in a more, I guess, journalistic type of way. I wanted to highlight some of the maps. This is an example of a way that you can use ArcGIS Online and integrate it within story mapping. So we actually went ahead and mapped out all the hospitals in the California's Inland Empire region. And yeah, so this is something really important to note, is that hospitals are really, an interesting focal point to look at when talking about the Salton Sea and health, because, the region has some of the highest rates of hospitalizations or emergency room visits for asthma-related symptoms. So mapping out the hospitals was a great idea and a way to kind of show that, hey, these are the hospitals in the region. And we could have even took it a step further and mapped out travel times between each hospital from each region around the Salton Sea. So, there's a lot of leeway with that. Unfortunately, just for the sake of our time and your time, talking about the actual process of mapping may not be feasible for this session. However, if that's something of interest, please do let us know, post workshops, and maybe we can host one related to spatial mapping and stuff like that. So I'm just gonna speed things up a little bit. Here you have Dr. David Lowe, who's actually present at the workshop today. So hello, Dr. Lowe. It's great to see you. And so we kind of talked more about his work, since his work was very much focused on actual, the aerosols in the region and dust and how that really impacts respiratory health. And so you can see an image of one of the environmental exposure chambers in Dr. Lowe's lab, which we talk more about in detail within our story map. And so if someone could put the story map link in the chat, that would be great, so that y'all can, take a look at it during your own time. And so as we scroll to the end here, we conclude our story map talking briefly about environmental justice and the need for equity, and really focusing on ways in which we can uplift the communities that are being impacted by environmental health issues. And here we kind of give our attributions, acknowledgements, we include our references, and here are the people who are really involved, and we'd like to just give a quick shout out to the folks who helped us with the story map and supported these works. But this is an example of a story map. Obviously, there is not necessarily a right or wrong way to make one, but this is an example of a type of approach that you could take when making your own. So before I move on, does anyone have any initial thoughts, questions, concerns before we actually go into having you all work on your own story map? Feel free to either put them in the chat or unmute your mics and let us know.
Any question?
Yes, Dr. Lowe.
So, part of the purpose of this is to publicize the information and so on. So are there ways in which you can get the links or somehow publicize that these are put together? I mean, how do we get, and like a related question is like, is there a Spanish translation?
Yeah, that's a great question, Dr. Lowe. So actually, I think when it comes to actually creating the story map, that one can, once you get practice, it's pretty self-explanatory. But I think as far as marketability, that's a whole other, I guess, the beast in itself. And I think ways to do that include, creating marketing campaigns, social media graphics, to really get the word out there that these story maps have been created and disseminated to whoever it is they're being disseminated to. At this current moment, we don't have translations for our story map just due to time and resources. However, this is definitely something that we've kind of talked about in the past, and we've even discussed creating a video with Spanish translation to kind of talk about the story maps. And that could be another dissemination tool to bridge the accessibility barriers. So that's another consideration is, even if we were to add a Spanish translation on our story map, the truth is that our story map is quite inaccessible due to the internet bandwidth issues, because we do have a lot of moving elements. And so perhaps making a video talking about the story map, whether it be in Spanish or English, might actually be a more effective way of disseminating information and conveying that information, as well as linking the individuals to the story map in the case they want to actually use it. So, you know, we definitely do acknowledge that, you know, even we as story map makers, we also know that story maps can be, you know, really effective and really great ways to convey information, but they definitely are not the only way. Sorry if that was a little ranty, but I don't know if anyone else wants to jump in or if that answered your question, Dr. Lowe.
Yeah, and if I could just say that that's, as Preeti said, it's definitely it's on our radar, and we've talked about in story maps, you can either just put a Spanish translation right underneath every paragraph, or you can make a link that takes you to the same story map, but it's all Spanish translated. And then for the barrier of the bandwidth, making like a printout. And so those are things that we, now that we have this one like published and finished, are starting to talk about like, what are those ways that we can make it more accessible? Because as Preeti mentioned, it's, you know, does like you could tell even just in her sharing her screen through Zoom and then sharing the story map that the bandwidth wasn't there, that it wasn't loading everything. Also, doing like a video on YouTube with the story map or things like that. So like the story map is like your way to put in your research, but then you can like alter it in so many different ways or connect it to different like websites or things like that as well.
Another practical question. So do you guys have plans to produce, it sounded like you're working on a third one, or is that one already, because we haven't posted it on the website yet. How many of these are you practically going to be able to produce before you leave campus?
Yes, so we have 2 more coming out. They've been, and this one has been, the second one, the third one we're doing is on like government agencies, outside research outside of UCR. And that was because yourself and other researchers and the community members kind of wanted to know what other people were thinking. There's so many people working in the Salton scene. It's such a conglomerate of different ideas and projects and things like that. So we wanted to have these story maps as a way to see like, this is what these people are working on. This is what's happening here. And so that one is underway. We've done a few interviews for that, and we've reached out to people. It's also kind of going through like, you know, the research process of barriers of people not getting back to us or things like that. And then we have a fourth one that we wanted to interview the different local communities from Torres Martinez to North Shore and Prepocha. Actually, when we first started this story map, I was hoping we would also get a Prepocha translation on that. But just between all the different like moving parts, it's kind of slowed our work on that a lot. It hasn't even been something that we've been able to talk about yet. But anyway, and like with the community story map, we're hoping to provide compensation. And so we're waiting on IRB approval for that before we can reach out to community members for that. But then the great thing is that now that we know how to make story maps, like Dr. Cheney and Conchita have expressed interest in working on how to turn their work into story maps. And so we can provide workshops on that, on how to do it for them to just do it themselves. So
are you gonna get to use the buttons and, you know, links to videos, and we can watch some of the interviews that way?
Yeah, so that's something like with Zoom, it kind of, it doesn't make the best video. But that's definitely something that we would talked about. Like kind of Preeti mentioned doing audio because the audio comes out really clear. And so like there's a lot of ways that you can make those moving parts.
Well, I was just thinking because, you know, we're starting to work on publications now, and this might be a nice way to explain the results. You can't just point somebody to a scientific paper. You know, this is a kind of a format where you can actually go into a layman explanation of what the research was involved and what the results mean and how do we interpret them and what does the community need to know about the research, you know, the results.
Yeah, I think we completely agree, and that would be a great conversation that we could definitely have following this workshop. And so I think for the sake of time, we're going to move on to our next section. But just to kind of wrap things up with the Q&A, thank you again, Dr. Lowe, for your fantastic questions. And we look forward to talking more about ways in which we can collaborate with story mapping. But, you know, ultimately, we did make a series, and we're creating a series of story maps. And that's something to note for the folks out there listening, is that, you know, there's different ways of conveying your information. For some people, it might be helpful to put everything on one story map, but for us, we found that it would be more effective to have different story maps conveying different sections of the story, because it's a continuous project. And ultimately, you know, again, important to keep those accessibility concerns in mind and to keep working on them, and also understanding the different type of audiences that you're reaching out to. So for example, our first story map, I unfortunately wasn't involved with that one, but Sahar and Isabel were, and basically that just gave a background of what the salt and sea issue is. The second story map talked about research being done around the story map. The third one will be about policymakers and policy in the region, and the fourth will be community interviews and hearing their thoughts. And so it's important to note that we really try to target and reach out to every single type of demographic possible to ensure that we're being extremely clear and, you know, making sure that our work is being catered towards different audiences. So something to keep in mind when you're creating your own story maps too.
So for this next part, we wanted to get a sense of who hasn't set up an ArcGIS online account. So maybe if everyone can like raise your hand in Zoom, and we can just kind of see who still needs to set up an account. Okay, a good amount of people. Thank you. So if you guys could all navigate, so this next part might be a little clunky because we want you guys to have a chance to work with story maps and work in the online platform. So if you guys can all navigate away from us and go to this website right here, if you have a UCR email, you're going to follow step 2 for the UCR login. And if you don't have a UCR email, you're going to follow step 2 for the public login. The only difference is UCR's account has more features, but the public account still has the story map platform. It just doesn't have some of the other applications that go with it. And in the meantime, if anybody has any other questions that we can talk about, we just want you guys to be able, we want you guys to have an account so that you can walk away from this workshop ready to make your own story map.
I guess in the meantime, and we'll give folks a couple minutes, maybe until 1:55 or 6, so 2 or 3 minutes. I saw there was a question in the chat by Christina Gonzalez, and they said, since this is the way of the future for presenting to the community, would it be best practice to add IRB from the beginning? So I'm not familiar with IRB processes just because my research doesn't really relate to IRB, but Sahar and or Isabel, what are your guys' thoughts?
Yeah, if I can comment on that, I really wish that I had added community members to the IRB in the beginning because it would have made sharing data so much easier. And so for anyone who is trying to work with community members on that, getting them ready with city training and adding them to the IRB just makes it like it's already done and you don't have to worry about it again. So, I mean, like, not that it's like that hard to put in amendments, but if you just want to get your project going and off on the right path, I recommend like how you structure your IRB is really important, and making sure it has all the elements so that you can talk to people about your interviews and things like that.
And just to add on really quickly, Sahar, would you mind explaining what an IRB is for non-academics who are either on this call or will be watching this recording?
Yeah, so an IRB is a human subjects research and review board. I'm completely forgetting what the acronym stands for exactly. But
Institutional Review Board.
Thank you, Dr. Lowe. Institutional Review Board. And so they have it for like clinical trials as well as research like interviews and stuff. So anytime you're working with people, you need to go through an IRB to make sure that your research is ethical and that you're following the proper steps. You're giving people informed consent. You're protecting their data once, if they're sharing with you personal experiences. You need to have a plan of how you can keep that safe, that what are you going to do with the data? So all of that kind of goes into your IRB.
Thank you, Sahar. So does anyone else need any more time to set up their account? If so, please raise your hand, and if not, we'll move on to the next section. So
I think I saw a question out there from Mia. I thought I saw your hand up. Maybe not. No.
No, I'm good. I got an account set up through UCR and start the story. I was just raising my hand that I was someone that hadn't made an account in advance.
Oh, okay. No problem. Thank you. Okay. So we had anticipated, depending on like what, how many people showed up and what we wanted to do, that we would break out into 3 different groups. But if you guys would rather stay in one group, if everyone is feeling like you'd rather just kind of talk about how to make story maps even better by, your research design or including different perspectives, or if you guys wanted to just work on your own research, if you brought materials, like I mentioned in the beginning, or if you need materials, we can share those with you. And you can just work through the story map, the platform. So I guess group 1 sounds fun. I know, right? Thank you. So we had like 3 different breakout rooms. So for those of you who kind of still needed help setting up or just kind of wanting to navigate the platform, for anyone who has an idea and wants to brainstorm it, or for those of you who are just ready to start making your story map and integrating maps and stuff. Should we send out a poll, or how's everybody feeling? This is kind of open discussion right now.
I think our group is small enough where if y'all want, feel free to just comment in the chat or raise your hand and speak up as far as which one you would prefer, just so we can get a better sense of which angle you want to kind of take this workshop. So we can even sit in a group and y'all can even like talk about your own work, and we can have a bit of it's a bootleg consultation studio here, or we can talk about some of the technical issues or how to actually approach the narrative, etc. So feel free to drop in the chat which y'all prefer, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, we're totally here as a resource for you at this point. So whatever you guys want.
Watch the technical side.
Just like how you assemble, I mean, all the moving parts and stuff.
Okay.
I agree. This is new to most of us, so that's probably the biggest struggle we'll have.
I think I have like a pretty silly question, but where's like the whole start a new story like option?
Well, maybe we should do that. Let's, Preeti, do you want to, since you're sharing your screen, you want to just go to like the opening page, go to like ucr.maps.arcgis.com.
Yes, we'll do. And for some reason I got signed out, so let me figure that out. But
no problem. If you're having issues too, let me know.
Here, yeah, It's okay. We'll figure it out. We love a good technical issue during a workshop.
Yeah, let me tell everyone, it took me probably like 3 or 4 months to understand story maps. And there was a good like month where none of my maps worked. None of them showed up. I couldn't understand. A lot of the time it's your internet bandwidth is the issue. So if you're ever having an issue in story maps, like I made a map and now it's not, it just see like a gray screen. Try clearing your history, because that I learned the hard way. Took me a month to figure that out.
Awesome. So I'm logging into my account and it's loading. And so to the individual who asked the question, here, when you log in, you'll see a thing that says new story. So you'll click on that, and then you can either start from scratch, or they have some templates that are a bit more advanced and honestly a little bit more confusing to use. So I would actually recommend starting from scratch so you can really like visualize what you want ahead of time, create an outline off screen or offline, and then kind of put it together. So please let us know if you're unable to see that. And if you want to share your screen to show us like what's up, then we can definitely aid you in that. But I don't know if that was helpful.
Maybe if you went to the like online, with like the globe, that the first page.
And here, I'll drop the link in the chat too, because you can either go into Arcgis Online, which I want to note is a separate website, which connects to this one, or you can go directly on the story map website, which I've dropped in the chat. So I just want to also clarify that. And I guess as far as putting things together, so we did put together some sample materials if y'all want to play around with those. But actually, I'm working on a story map for a school project. It's still under construction. So if you want, I can show y'all that, and we can kind of play around with that. And yeah, because I have the materials. I'm actually working on it to do next week. So I can show y'all how I'm actually thinking of putting that together if you're interested. I also noticed that a couple new folks joined us, so thank you all for attending our workshop. We really appreciate it. If you just joined, if you'd like, I can share my screen again to show y'all how to set up your account. But basically, we talked about the basic elements of how to create a story map. We talked about, ways in which you can go about creating it, things and considerations to think about when actually constructing a story map, types of data you can include, as well as the type of elements and technical details or elements that story mapping really has to offer. So, what I'll do then is I'll actually put something in the chat. And this was something that I actually made right before the workshop. I created a bit of a template for outlining, and I included a hyperlink to the PDF of our presentation to that. So for the folks joining us, feel free to check that out. Let me see if I can add that in. And so it looks like a majority of the folks here were kind of thinking about really seeing the, I guess, story mapping in action. Would you all like me to create a new story map and use the sample materials that we provided? I see some shaking heads. All right, cool. So we'll do that. So we're gonna start from scratch. And just out of curiosity, for the folks who just joined, what do y'all hope to get out of this workshop? Because we weren't able to interact with y'all, and we're going into the creation of the story map. So if you have any materials that you already have or want to narrate, just like, I don't know, hop in. What's up?
Hop in or type it in the chat.
I came late, but I'm just wanting to become familiar with the tools and to see examples. So this is fabulous.
Great, thank you. All right, well then I guess we'll hop right in. So we're gonna start from scratch. And again, I wanted to note that I'm on the storymaps.arcgis.org arcgis.com website. So please go to that one. It's a little bit easier to navigate. And so actually when you make an account, it'll automatically put your name in the author thing, which is kind of nice. And so you'll have a title, subtitle, and then there's something like a little plus sign symbol. When you click on it, it'll give you like I guess, what you can actually add onto your story maps, the different elements. So I'm gonna click on the drive link that if y'all want to like work along with us on this, if Izzy or Sahar, if one of you could link this in the chat, that would be great, so that folks can look at the materials by themselves. But basically, we put together a little bit of a sample workshop pamphlet of some sort. So we included a couple images. We'll give it a second to load. And we also have this document, which we added some content to play around with. Most of the content, I want to note, is sourced either from the HDR website or from our own work. So just wanted to point that out. While this is loading, does anyone have any initial thoughts, questions, concerns? You know, how are you feeling? Like, please let us know. Yeah.
Also, you can download all of this material from Expo Pass, but I'm putting them into the chat as well.
So it's loading slowly but surely, and it looks like, oh great, and I see Sahar added those materials to the chat. So basically, as written on here, the task is to kind of take the information below and the links provided to create a story map highlighting the Childhood Asthma and Salton Project. You know, Izzy and Sahar, how about y'all jump in? What are some ways or visions you see for this new story map with the writing here?
If you just want to, yeah, if you want to go to like, let's just copy and paste some of this and put it in so people can see like how it can be organized. So yeah, like Preeti was saying, this is all like stuff that we put into our other story maps. So kind of let's like take this moment to just recreate that so you can see how we did it. So like you can see here, Preeti's changing it from a paragraph to a heading or a subheading. Pick anything. it'll change like how big it is. You can also at the top, Preeti, can you navigate to those 3 little dots at the top? So story settings. So you can add analytics. You can put display settings. You can change the publication date if you want to have that in there or not. Go ahead and click cancel. If you go to design, and so this is just kind of giving you your theme. And you can even make your own themes. Like I, in our recent, when we were like playing around for this workshop, I made like a HDR theme with like yellow, like the colors of HDR of UCR. So if you like hit like Obsidian, or okay, yeah, create your own theme, anything. Sorry.
No worries. Yeah, I just wanted to show that when you click on browse themes, that's where you can either create a new one or you can find some and create some and favorite them. I don't have any on mine, but I'm sure y'all can play around and make your own. But yeah, let's go with Obsidian, and let's add that in there. So look at that. Personally, I love a dark mode kind of template. It's nice because it's easier on the eyes. Especially if you have glasses, you know, it's pretty nice to look at. Let's see. So there's different covers. So as we kind of showed y'all with our story map, we had a bit of like a big blown up image. So let's see if we can add one here. And look at that. So you can. And so let's see. Let's add a cover image. And I'm going to find one on my computer that we can use just as a placeholder.
And for those of you who are really tech savvy, you're probably gonna like really love story maps because you can like embed audio. So in our first story map, I don't know if I still have it because I'm not tech savvy, so I couldn't figure out how to get it to properly work. But you can like have like, as soon as people click on something or navigate down, you can have audio that plays automatically. And then once you navigate away, it turns off or things like that. So like links and embedding things really work well with story maps. It's just kind of figuring out like the right file and things like that. Sorry, Preeti.
No worries. No, thank you. Yeah, I was taking a minute to find a photo. My my computer is really unorganized. I have so many files. So let's pick this this one. So pretty sad. It's a fish. Sorry if that's a little graphic, but this is an image, natural image from the Salton Sea, which is, you know, pretty telling of the environmental condition there. Yeah, it's pretty sad. Maybe I should pick a different photo, or we'll just keep this because I can't find other ones. But, yeah, so let's go with this one. And you know, let's take this and make that the title. So I'm gonna cut that. We're gonna put this here. And so it looks like there is a word limit for the title, which is why it's important to actually create subtitles. I think that's always really helpful and it's less overwhelming. So make sure when you're creating a title for your story map that it's pretty you know, succinct and concise and isn't super lengthy so that it doesn't retract from what you're trying to talk about. So let's say, you know, environment justice. So we have a little, you know, obviously this is just like, we didn't even prepare to like create a story map. So like just right off the bat, like here are some thoughts and ideas. So we have a little like working title and subtitle, you know, author name and a photo. And yeah, so now let's go into the actual content.
And then, sorry to cut you off. I just wanted to mention that story maps automatically saves everything you do, but you can't go back. So if you change something, it saves it. And I don't think there's a back feature. I have not been able to find that. So just be careful what you delete. But know that if your computer like crashes, it's still saved your story map.
Yeah, and that's the really, I think, one of the biggest benefits of using a cloud-based online software or program, because it does automatically save. So if you mess up, you know, at least it's still there, but as Sahar mentioned, you can't go back. And so Isabel here talked about outlines and content structuring. And so I was wondering if you wanted to jump in and talk about, you know, with these contents, what do you think about how to structure it? Like, how do you think we should go about structuring?
Yeah, definitely. So I know something that's helpful for me is, and I think we did it too in the first couple story maps, is like writing a little bit of a summary or synthesis of the content that you do have, because then you know the message that you're trying to get across, right? And then when you have that, maybe find some sort of media, like a photo or a video that really helps depict that idea. And then I think that it's good to then work from there and kind of add around your initial or core thought so that you make sure you're really getting it across. So with that, if we want to look at the asthma rates in particular, if we have a graphic about that, we could find that graphic and then really go through and explain and then tie in our qualitative and quantitative data to kind of support that image. Then you're really making sure that the media is integrated and it's not just like thrown in or slapped on. And it really helps you customize and make sure that you're getting your own voice and narration across to really, again, get the story across that you want to. And I think too, it's really just about, it's about working with all of the different features and really figuring out how they're best for you to like fit into what you want to tell.
Yeah, and so as you can see, what I'm trying to do is, obviously I just added a big block of text, which, important to note, we did work on it ahead of time, but you know, making sure there's subsections so it's easier to navigate is really important. So let's add a background.
Yeah, I think subsections are really, really good and important too, just to make sure that, again, not just relying on the media, you're also summarizing and synthesizing like for your audience what you want them to get from what you're sharing as well, especially with different platforms and different audience types.
Yes, I completely agree. And I'm gonna add a map. So again, I want to be very clear that you do have to make maps ahead of time. I do a lot of GIS work. That's like my kind of research analysis preference. I really like using spatial analysis in my own work. So I do use Arcgis Online and spatial data science related you know, softwares quite often. So you can see I have a lot of maps for different things. These are just a few of the many. So let's use this one. This is the same one that we did use earlier. And it basically, the data is sourced from a website called Cal EnviroScreen. Sahar, would you like to kind of talk more about that? Because I know you're the one who discovered it.
Yeah, thank you. Cal EnviroScreen is I guess it's an ArcGIS software through the state of California. That I don't know who owns the software, but probably Esri, honestly. But it's made by the state, and it maps out different health disparities and from pollution, like different types of pollution too. From you can look at illnesses like asthma, or you can look at causes of pollution, like dump sites, toxic waste sites, things like that, water pollution. So it's kind of incredible. If you haven't seen it, they just came out with their trial version of their 4.0 version, but their 3.0 is really great too. And so it honestly tells you so much information that you can either draw from and make a statistic, or you can download that information and make it into a map.
Awesome, thank you, Sahar. So again, as I kind of mentioned earlier in our workshop, it's difficult to talk about the fundamentals to GIS during this time constraint. But if that is something of interest, maybe like a geoscience workshop, or you know, a health geo workshop where we talk about how to use GIS for medical and scientific research, specifically health related and highlighting health disparities, please do let us know. I'm unsure if there's a workshop evaluation link at the end of our workshop or on the conferencing platform, but if there is, please go ahead and include that so we know for later. But as you can see here, this map, essentially it depicts the, I believe it's asthma rate per 100,000 individuals. Do not quote me on that. That is what I believe. But it's essentially the asthma rates per census tract throughout the state of California. And so we actually added these labels that say Riverside County, Coachella Valley, and Imperial County. So you can actually do that in the mapping software itself. But we want to make sure that this map is focused in the region and isn't just the whole state, because it's kind of hard to see when it's all zoomed out like that. So you can actually lock maps in place. So what we're gonna do here is we're gonna zoom in to the view that we want. We're gonna make sure that all the features are visible, because if I were to do this, you can't see certain features. So making sure the features you want to show up are showing up. And then we're gonna make sure that there's no navigation so that it's locked in place. And yeah, and so now I'm gonna click this and it's gonna place the map in the area that I want it to. and you're gonna have to give it a second because again, as I mentioned, it takes a minute. But hopefully after it actually loads, you'll see that the map actually shows up here. So it finally rendered, and here you go, you have a map, and it also has the subtitle or title of the map, which we named it earlier. So that's something cool to look into. But I think we have a good background and overview of the project. And so now let's create a new section. And I just want to make clear that feel free to jump in at any point in time if you have any questions, comments, concerns as to what we're talking about, just because I do see the time and we only have about 10 more minutes left for the workshop. So please do jump in if you have any comments. I'm going to add one more section before we wrap things up, just so that we have time for only questions. But yeah, please do jump in if you have anything that you have to say, like comments, questions, concerns.
I'd like to add to, I'm sorry, Dr. Lowe. Something that's been most helpful for me in figuring out how to navigate and work it out is really just playing around with it and, you know, figuring out what works for me and trying out all the features on myself. And I think sometimes that's just the best way to learn things too, is to do it hands-on and really just figure it out.
I had a question because, you know, part of this is kind of communication. And so I was wondering, is there, I think somebody was alluding to earlier, you know, whether or not some of this can be converted to like a printable form or other kind of format that can be, you know, disseminated in other ways. Is that, you know, when you design these things, is it something where you can think, well, can it be exported into like a PDF file or something like that? Is that a possibility?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. And I think it's something to keep in mind when actually creating story maps is it feasible for this to be rendered into an appropriate PDF? Because if you're, say you integrate the like slideshow, you know, you can't really create a PDF that's effective enough. I see that in the chat, Mia states that the challenge with that is that it would no longer be interactive. And that's a great point, I think, is that interactivity would be delayed. On the other hand, however, you know, for folks who may not have the ability to engage in the interactive components of the story map due to bandwidth concerns, having a hard copy or a non-moving or stationary form of this would be helpful to at least have that as an option for folks to use or look at. And yes, you can still take them throughout the journey because it's really like, think of it as a journalism or like a blog post type of platform where you're just creating a blog post about what you're trying to convey, and you can add some extra elements and make it look fancy, really. It doesn't have to be as complicated as some of the story maps that I've seen or the ones that we've created. You know, we definitely want ours to have more moving parts because, you know, it definitely showcases not only the work that we're doing, but also the work that other folks are doing in a more effective way. But again, there's no right or wrong answer to, or rather right or wrong approach. So I think we'll add in a couple photos here and there.
Will you, Preeti, will you do like a map tour or a sidecar feature just so that people can see what those are?
I will. And let's do the sidecar because the map tour is pretty difficult to navigate if you're new. So let's do this, and we're gonna do a docked panel because the docked panel is what we used for our story map, where the right side like text and elements stay stationary, while when you scroll down, the other side stays the same. The floating one is nice if you have smaller bits of text that you want to show, but if you have longer narratives, it's kind of easier to use the docked panel. It's less visually a lot, I guess. And so we can add some media here. So let's add an image. Let's see. And I see we have a great conversation going on in the chat, so please continue engaging. We love to see it. Let's see. I guess I think for the sake of time, I'm not going to add anything necessarily yet, but we're just going to pretend like there's a photo here. But basically, to use this feature, you would just add, your text here. So, and then you would have another section that would be like, and as you scroll, it'll change. So if there's a different image here or a map, and then there's another one here, when you scroll down, it'll show a different thing. So that's really neat. Personally, one of my favorite features on here. But I think, again, just because we do have only 5 minutes, we're going to have to cut that short. But let's go back to our presentation real quick, just to kind of wrap things up. And let's go to one of the final slides. So Sahar or Isabel, if y'all want to jump in to kind of wrap up the workshop.
So I hope you guys kind of got a general sense of what you can do with story maps as well as its limitations. We've had a great experience just trying to, one, make the process easier for people to understand, as well as how to get our research to be more incorporative of the community, of of different projects. So there's other story maps that our group is doing from like COVID-19 narratives and things like that. So there's limits to story maps, as we've kind of talked about. It's not accessible to everybody, but it also is a great way for you to disseminate your research to a wide audience. That this is something that will live online indefinitely. So it's a way for you to put your work into something that's immersive and interactive. I'll let Izzy, if you have anything to say, or if anybody has a question before we go.
I'd just like to say too that we're always going to be here too if anyone has any further questions or ever wants to reach out and get any help on any of this. We're more than happy to be a resource, and yeah, we wish you the best.
So with that, we conclude our presentation and workshop. I hope y'all enjoyed it. Again, due to time limitations and just how much you can play around with story maps, obviously we weren't able to do a deep dive, but we hope that you got a general idea of, some of the ways in which you can actually use it. And so I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And Sahar and Izzy, if y'all want to maybe drop your emails in the chat, I'll do so as well, so that folks can reach out if they have any follow-ups. But again, thank you all for attending.
Yeah, and we'll add our PowerPoint to our resources page within Expo Pass. And I think Dr. McMullen and Catherine mentioned that that's going to live there also indefinitely. So all of the resources that we put in the chat today will be there as well. So
I have a quick question.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Hi, Sahar, Isabel, and Preeti. Great work. Thank you so much for this workshop. I've been thinking about story maps, and it's just really helped demystify the whole process. I have one tiny question, really, in terms of time frame, from the inception of the idea into going into the creation. I know it's going to change depending on the elements that are going into, but approximately how long really did it take y'all to complete one of your story maps?
So for us, our second story map, we did all the interviews over the summer, last summer, most of them, and then a few more after that. We had a total of, I think, about 6 or 8 interviews. And then we cut 4 interviews out of that. So just have the 4 to highlight those researchers. But the actual like process of making the story map took like, I don't know what, Preeti, like, and Izzy, like a month or 2 months to like practice and change things around and things like that.
Yeah, and I think it also depends too on like the type of story map you're working on, because ours had a lot of different elements to it. We did interviews, we incorporated quant data, you know, so we had a lot of stuff going on. But I'll give you an example. So as I kind of mentioned earlier, I'm making my own story map for a project I have for my health economics course, and I'm assessing asthma rates per Medicare recipients throughout the country and seeing which states have had increases and decreases in basically emergency visits to hospitals who are Medicare holders. And honestly, it took me like maybe, I mean, I'm almost done. It took me maybe 2 weeks. So like, it really depends on like the work you're doing and like what you're trying to incorporate. But I will say, if you have like interviews and stuff like that, it will take longer just because of the type of materials you're incorporating. But it doesn't need to take a month or 2 months. It can be much shorter.
All right, well, I just want to say thank you everyone for attending our workshop. We really appreciate it, and we had a lot of fun putting all this material together. So again, you have our emails if you have any questions, and I think it's time for the next for the last session of the conference. So thank you everyone.
Thank you.
Well, have a great day.
Bye. Have a good day, everyone.